I understand why you've raised...
We're leaving this hearing at this point. You can continue to watch on our website. Go to cspan.org. The U.S. House is gaveling in to work on federal land and water bills this afternoon. We're expecting votes at about 1:30 and the swearing in of a new member later this afternoon. And now live to the House floor.
Thanks for giving us another day. We ask today that you bless the members of this assembly to be the best and most faithful servants of the people they serve. Purify their intentions, that they will say what they believe and act consistent with their words. Help them, indeed help us all, to be honest with themselves, so that they will not only be concerned about how their words and deeds are weighed by others, but also with how their words and deeds affect the lives of those in need and those who look to them for support, help, strength, and leadership. May all that is done this day in the people's house be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, last Friday the President revealed a new policy that promotes illegal aliens who are in our country from deportation. This shifts jobs from lawful Americans to illegal aliens. As a former immigration attorney myself, we welcome legal immigrants. In 2009 and 2010, Congress refused to pass legislation giving amnesty to the same individuals included under the President's new policy. Not only is this decision a presidential abuse of power, it also shows this administration is out of touch with American families who are suffering from lack of jobs. Instead of encouraging policies aimed to help our law-abiding citizens find jobs, the President believes that he should reward those who have broken laws by granting them work permits. At a time of record unemployment, I urge the President and the liberal-controlled Senate to take up the dozens of bipartisan bills that have passed the House to help American families find jobs. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism. I yield back, and Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that my name be withdrawn as a co-sponsor of H.R. 1380, the new Alternative Transportation to Give Americans Solutions Act of 2011. Thank you.
Without objection. For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York seek recognition? The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Imagine you got up every day of your adult life working for the same company, helping build the American auto industry. You worked hard, but you were proud because you're part of something bigger than just collecting a paycheck. You were part of rebuilding the economic engine that gave us the middle class. You count on a pension, life insurance, and health insurance when you retired because that's what you were promised. You thought that you lived the American dream until one day that dream turned into a nightmare. That's what happened when GM spun off Delphi Corporation in 1999 and later filed for bankruptcy, and over 20,000 salaried employees were left out to dry. Family finances were ruined all across this country, including the towns of Rochester and cities of Lockport and Rochester in my district. This must be corrected. That's why I'm delighted to see the reemergence of GM as a global powerhouse, but we cannot forget these individuals. I've called on this administration for their help. I've not received an adequate response from the Department of Labor and the Department of Treasury, and I call on the President to take up the cause of these retirees because they need our help. Their promises are broken, and it's our responsibility to help them at this time. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, successful agriculture is vital for America and for my home state of Illinois to thrive in the future. The farmers in my district in northern Illinois are saying that they can do without direct payments as long as there is some protection from catastrophe. That's why I'm looking forward to supporting a broad plan for strong, reliable, and affordable crop insurance when we take up the Farm Bill next week. A successful Farm Bill must have strong protection from uncontrollable risks for our nation's agriculture sector. Farmers take large risk every year to acquire the seed, feed, and supplies they will need for the season. Crop insurance gives them the certainty to take these risks, knowing that they will be protected from conditions beyond their control. We have an opportunity to empower farmers by giving them choices and the ability to tailor protection to their needs, while also asking that they share the risk so the taxpayer isn't picking up the whole tab. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Vermont seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and 5 seconds.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In 11 days, the interest rates on the Stafford student loans will double from 3.4% to 6.8%. It's unthinkable that Congress would allow this to happen. But here we are, only 11 days from the deadline and no closer to a solution than we were months ago. This is one of those only in Washington situations. Nearly everyone agrees that we can't let these rates double. Doing so will be a real blow to the middle class and those trying to climb their way into the middle class. It would be bad for the economy, and it makes no practical sense. The federal government is borrowing at 1.6%. Yet Congress has been unable to extend the lower rate and is now only 11 days away. Take Jessie from Norwich, who will be affected. Despite significant financial support from scholarships in her family, she's graduating from nursing school with over $150,000 in student loan debt. At age 26, Jessie worries that she'll not be able to start a family or put a down payment on a home because of this staggering debt. She worries if interest rates increase, a bad situation will be even worse. Madam Speaker, we have 11 days. It's time to get this done. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition? And the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, last week I received an extremely disturbing report about China's one-child policy from China's central Shanxi province. Fin Jiangmai was 7 months pregnant and home alone when she was abducted by government family planning officials. She was taken to a hospital and bound while her child was administered a powerful poison. After she gave birth to her dead child without the aid of painkillers, the baby was then left beside her on the hospital bed, as shown in this picture. Her husband is a common worker who has no recourse for the crime that has been perpetrated on his wife and child. Family planning officials in Jiangxi took this gruesome step in order to meet their quotas under China's brutal one-child policy. This is further evidence that government officials routinely take extreme measures to enforce China's barbaric one-child policy. It's a human rights issue. It's far past time that the Chinese government stop this terrible repression and end the destruction of lives. I call on Secretary Clinton to condemn this policy in the strongest terms. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The American public deserve better. They deserve more from their Congress. The sacrifices that so many millions of Americans have given, whether it's in military service or to service to this nation, to allow us to stand here and self-govern ourselves, needs to be repaid with maybe the words of Daniel Webster above us up there. Let's do something great in our time. The differences this nation has is what makes us strong, differences of opinion. But compromise and common purpose is the glue that holds us together. If there's anything we can agree upon, it's that this nation should have a world-class transportation system to move people and goods in an efficient, effective manner. And we're sitting here not passing a transportation bill. We have never had this problem in this Congress. The last 5 transportation bills have passed with an average of 375 bipartisan votes. We have a bill that passed the Senate 100 days ago that passed with 74 to 22 in the votes. I'm not sure they could agree it's Tuesday in the Senate, and they compromised on a transportation bill. I urge my colleagues here, either get the compromise done this week or bring the Senate bill forward and let us vote up or down to put America back to work and do something great in our time. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, President Obama's regulatory war on coal is having an effect. In the 2015-2016 capacity auction by Regional Transmission Organization, PJM Interconnection, the market clearing price for the Mid-Atlantic area was $167 per megawatt, and for Northern Ohio was $357 per megawatt. The average over the last 8 years has been $89. Andy Ott at PJM Interconnection said that, quote, capacity prices were higher than last year's because of retirements of existing coal-fired generation resulting largely from environmental regulations which go into effect in 2015. A study published in 2010 by the Edison Electric Institute identified 7 different new regulations that will raise the cost of electrical generation by 2017. The costs are huge. The EPA's estimates of costs for its utility MAC regulation alone is $9.6 billion per year starting in 2015. The House of Representatives has taken action to prevent the imposition of new regulatory burdens in the midst of this fragile economic recovery, but the Senate has yet to follow that lead. Madam Speaker, prices are climbing and Americans will suffer. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, last Thursday, June 14th, marked the 2000th American fatality in Operation Enduring Freedom. Today, that number is now 2004 OEF fatalities, of which 1,887 happened in Afghanistan. Suicide rates by our veterans are now 1 every day. This is the human cost of war. It is heartbreaking. 43 hail from Massachusetts, including 8 from my district. These are not just statistics. They were living, breathing men and women in uniform. At this solemn moment, I would like to send my condolences to the families of Army Private Brian Mo Quinn, Jr., 19 years old, from Worcester, Army Master Sergeant Sean Simmons, 39, from Ashland, Army Major Brian Mescal, 33, from Hopkinton, Marine Captain Kyle Vandegiesen, 29, North Attleboro, U.S. National Guard Sergeant Robert Barrett, 21, Fall River, Army Specialist Scott Andrews, 21, of Fall River, U.S. Army National Guard Private First Class Ethan Gonzalo, 21, Fall River, and Air Force Major David Broder, 34, from Auburn. You are not forgotten. I yield back my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition? And the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we all agree that rebuilding our nation's infrastructure is the best way to create jobs today and ensure long-term economic growth tomorrow. Our failure to pass a long-term, fully funded transportation authorization has undermined our competitiveness as a nation, overburdened our local and state governments, and hurt American businesses. It prevents the state and local governments in every single one of our districts from funding repairs to their bridges, roads, and railways. It leaves our infrastructure crumbling, and it discourages businesses from creating construction and manufacturing jobs that American workers could be filling today. Madam Speaker, I urge the Transportation Conference Committee to finalize their work before the current authorization expires at the end of next week. We owe it to the American people to get this done. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii seek recognition? And the gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, President Obama laid out in his State of the Union address a blueprint for an America to last. To do this, he said, we need to rebuild American economy by reviving manufacturing, new and innovative energy sources, educating and creating a strong, more skilled workforce, and more importantly, renewing our American values. I want to talk about the new and innovative energy sources. Remember when the ARRA was passed, President Obama spoke about building the green economy, jobs in the energy field that looks to the future. Hawaii shows that this can work. Our recent unemployment rate shows that it does work. Our UI rates are 6.3%, though we'd like to see it lower. Note that our initial claims are down 16%. Total claims are down 10% from last year. And the area where we're seeing the job creation is in the solar energy market. We have an 18% increase in the permits in the first 5 months of this year. Our Department of Labor projects 2,900 jobs by the end of this year. Green jobs, 25% over the past 2 years. President Obama has got it right. Let's look to the green economy. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, each year Americans write a check to Uncle Sam in the hopes that their money is going to the right places. Unfortunately, the federal government has lost credibility as the steward of taxpayer money. In the past 3 years, millions of taxpayer dollars have been squandered in risky green energy products, and many of those companies have failed. The beneficiaries of these shady adventures just happen to be the President's men. Enter Solandra. $500 million tax dollars subsidized a company that was doomed to fail. 1,800 people lost their jobs, and Americans will never see the refund on their money. But the cronyism continues. Last week, the Department of Energy awarded $2 million to Solar Mosaic. The President's former green job czar, Van Jones, is an advisor to that company. Imagine that. Time to quit gambling taxpayer money on risky projects for all the President's men. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, in 2003, the current Senate Minority Leader told NPR, and I quote, "Money is essential in politics and not something that we should feel squeamish about. Provided the donations are limited and disclosed, everyone knows who's supporting everyone else." End quote. I agree with that version of Senator McConnell. But there's a new version who revealed last week that he doesn't think we should know who's buying our democracy, and he compared this administration's opposition to unlimited anonymous campaign contributions to the Nixon administration. Well, I understand why Nixon came to mind, but I think the senator is projecting here. After all, he now believes anonymous donors using secret money should be able to influence elections, all out of public view. Nixon wrote that playbook. Anonymity allows people in campaigns to distort the truth at best or to lie outright with no chance of being held accountable. If you oppose disclosure of campaign financiers, you're endorsing dishonest campaigns. Madam Speaker, the voters have a right to judge the credibility of campaign ads, and that is simply impossible with disclosure of those who are, without disclosure of those who are influencing our elections. I yield back.
No.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 688 and ask for its immediate consideration.
And the clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 137, House Resolution 688. Resolved, that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill, H.R. 2578, to amend the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act related to a segment of the Lower Merced River in California and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and amendments specified in this resolution, and shall not exceed 90 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule an amendment in the nature of a substitute, consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 112-25. That amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to that amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order, except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
Gentleman from Utah is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Slaughter, with also congratulations and a welcome back to the gentlelady from New York who has been incapacitated for a while. It is nice to see her back on the floor with her health starting to recover. Pending that, I yield myself such time as I may consume. During the consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. And I also ask, Madam Speaker, that all members may have 5 legislative days which they may revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
This particular resolution provides a structured rule for the consideration of H.R. 2578, the Conservation and Economic Growth Act, which contains 14 titles containing important legislation impacting our nation's public lands and our national parks. The rule provides for 90 minutes of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chairman and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources, and it makes in order a vast majority of amendments which were filed at the Rules Committee, so this structured rule is extremely fair and will provide for a balanced and open debate on the merits of this particular bill. It was only a couple of Congresses ago, Madam Speaker, in which the Senate sent over an omnibus bill, had over 100 particular bills added to it. I should have been happy. 3 of them were mine, and even though mine were really great bills, some of the rest of them were really bad. That was 1,200 pages. But what was most egregious about that bill that was sent from the Senate is that 75 of those 100 bills had not had any hearing whatsoever in the House. One in particular that dealt with my state, although not my district, not only had not had a hearing in the House, it hadn't even had a hearing in the Senate when it was put into this pile. And it was brought to the floor under a closed rule. This bill, every single title has gone through regular order. The Committee of Jurisdiction has had a hearing on each of these elements. They have had a debate in full committee on each of these sections. And they have had a markup on every one of these bills. The committee has heard and has done the work. The amendments that were germane to the issue and were not assigned to other committees were made in order to be heard on the floor. So once again, this is a bill that is unique in the spectrum of traditional omnibus bills tying things together because it did go through regular order. The committee did hear each of these provisions, and it is appropriate to now send it over to the Senate so they can try to consider something at some time in some form of regular order. With that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. The gentlelady from New York.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding me the customary 30 minutes and yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, first I want to say how happy I am to be back, and I appreciate the welcome I've gotten from all my colleagues. And I've missed you terribly. I've missed you, as we used to say in Kentucky, like a front tooth. The bill before us today, Madam Speaker, is another wasted opportunity, I'm afraid. Today's legislation is composed of 14 separate bills, several of which are even bipartisan. But regrettably, these worthy proposals will not be signed into law because the majority has packaged them with other proposals that endanger our environment and public health. Several of the controversial provisions before us are based on Democratic proposals, but unfortunately, The Democrat bills were taken and rewritten in such a way, extremely, that they can no longer receive bipartisan support. Two provisions in particular illustrate the extreme and partisan approach. First, Title III would unnecessarily change a long-standing agreement and endanger the biologically sensitive Alaskan wilderness. This provision would open up our nation's largest national forest to logging and allow rare old-growth forests to be clear-cut and sold for private gain. Second, in the most extreme proposal before us, Title 14 would impose the so-called operational control zone over almost 100 million square miles of American land. The federal land within this zone, the Department of Homeland Security then would be allowed to ignore 36 environmental laws. And federal border agents would be allowed to operate with few limits on their power. My good friend from Utah has put forward an amendment to pare the 36 laws down to 16, but that is still 16 too many. Title 14 proposes a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Proponents claim that environmental protections prevent the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol from stopping illegal immigration, but however, sworn testimony by both the Border Control officials and the Federal Land Agency officials contradict this claim. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security opposes the legislation. My entire district, all of it, would fall under the newly created Operational Control Zone. And as a result, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol could take control over all the historic landmarks, such as the Theodore Roosevelt National Historic Site, build anything on it they needed. And I know my constituents pretty well after this number of years. They would not take to that at all. Meanwhile, the sacred, historic, and sovereign lands of the Tuscarora Indian Nation would also be open to federal agents. Such an extreme federal overreach would violate the sovereignty of the Tuscarora Indian Nation. Many other tribes around the country whose land falls within this zone would face the same problem. In a letter to the leaders of the House, the United South and Eastern Tribes wrote of the danger of this provision. They wrote, "Many Indian tribes have lands and sacred places located near the U.S. international borders, and we believe the sovereignty and cultural integrity of our member tribes and others is unnecessarily put in jeopardy by the sweeping approach of this bill. Federal cooperation, not federal overreach, is a proven and prudent way to protect our borders." A recent GAO report confirmed what we learned in sworn testimony. Every time federal cooperation between the Border Patrol and our land management officials was requested, it was given, every time. The only time conflicts remained between environmental laws and border enforcement was when Border Patrol officials didn't bother to ask the Department of the Interior nor the USDA for cooperation. Finally, it is worth mentioning that the majority violated the rules of the House when they combined 14 unrelated bills into the one bill before us today. However, the Rules Committee gave itself a waiver, despite repeatedly denying such waivers for Democrat proposals throughout the year. Once again, when the majority wants to break the rules, they find a way, but when Democrats ask for a waiver for one of our proposals, all of a sudden, the rules of the House have been written in stone. I urge my colleagues to oppose today's extreme and partisan legislation and to stand up against the federal overreach contained within this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady from New York reserves her time. The gentleman from Utah.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Within this bill, there are, as I said, several proposals that are there, all of them dealing with federal lands and all of them dealing with overreach that has taken place, unfortunately, by this administration. Let me just highlight a couple of them and why these bills are useful and very much important. Title 10 of this particular section deals with Cape Hatteras in North Carolina. Cape Hatteras in North Carolina was established as a recreation area. In fact, the economy of that particular county, Adair County, was established as a recreation zone and a recreation area. Authorized in 1937, that's still 30,000 acres for recreation purposes. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service started in negotiations with the community of how they would actually try to manage that land, especially governing off-road vehicles. They established certain restrictions that would limit visitation and for local residents who were there. The residents agreed to those even though they weren't really quite happy about it. And everything was going well until special interest groups started the litigation process. You see, the Fish and Wildlife Service had issued a biological opinion finding that this interim management strategy that was established in the cooperative and collaborative process had indeed solved the problem, and that there would never be any kind of jeopardy to any endangered species listed in that particular area. Everything was going well until, once again, there was a lawsuit. A year after this agreement had been made, there was a lawsuit which this administration unfortunately decided to negotiate out of court. So the lawsuit was never actually adjudicated. No judge made a decision. Basically, the administration caved to the special interest groups, and they rewrote the opinion that had been ruled by the Fish and Wildlife Service, their biological opinion, that it did not jeopardize any endangered species. And so that went into effect, and unfortunately in March of this year, they even shrank the rule again to make it even more restrictive than the consent decree that had been settled out of court. What this bill, this section of this particular bill does in Cape Hatteras is do what's logical. It goes back to the original concern, the original land management plan that was done with cooperation of the Fish and Wildlife Service and the local constituents that had been agreed upon, that had nothing to do with endangered species and did not jeopardize anything. Simply going back to what had been done before the administration decided simply to cave into special interest groups and settled outside of court. There's another section, I believe it's section 11, that deals with grazing rights. One of the things that businesses deal, especially those who deal with grazing rights, is they need a constant to make sure that the business is not uncertain. That is almost a significant part. One of the things we're finding on right now, though, is with grazing, especially in the West, excessive paperwork within the department means we create missed deadlines that causes environmental litigation. And once again, stability is a constant that is necessary in business, and grazing is a business. It's one of those problems that to redo a permit to allow grazing will take 4 to 7 years for a permit that's only 10 years in the first place. What this bill does is say those permits now go from 10 to 20 years, once again to give some consistency to those who are engaged in grazing activities. It also codifies appropriation language that has had bipartisan support for over a decade, and makes sure that NEPA review in crossing and trailing of livestock on public lands is not going to be subjected to another layer of red tape. This industry puts $1.4 billion into our economy every year. And if indeed we do not treat our ranchers well, the 22,000 ranchers who have these federal permits, the ability of maintaining this as a viable occupation is put in jeopardy. This amendment, this section, fixes that. It solves that problem. There are some other good ones. In fact, the one that I am proposing I will talk about in a minute, but for now, let me simply reserve my time.
Gentleman from Utah reserves his time. The gentlelady from New York.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Doggett.
Gentleman from Texas, recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentlewoman, and Madam Speaker, I rise to focus attention upon one provision in this legislation, perhaps a few rose petals hidden in a very unnecessary thicket of painful thorns that are the center of this legislation. Recently nominated as a World Heritage Site, the Spanish missions in San Antonio are a very unique treasure for parishioners, for tourists, and for Texans everywhere. In 2010, our able former colleague Ciro Rodriguez introduced bipartisan legislation both to expand the San Antonio Missions National Historical Park by about 151 acres, and to require a study by the Secretary of Interior about even further expansion of this important park. In 2010, this very House approved the Rodriguez legislation, though a companion bill was offered by Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, and she got it out of the Senate committee. The full Senate failed to act on the Rodriguez bill. During this Congress, I have been one of 5 members who joined Representative Canseco in reintroducing the Rodriguez bill. Instead of approving our bipartisan measure, the Resources Committee has merged only a fraction of that bill into a totally unrelated piece of legislation that is little more than a giant giveaway and exploitation of public property, and which will endanger irreplaceable natural resources from the seashore in North Carolina to the Tongass Wilderness in Alaska. While Senator Hutchison continues to work on a bipartisan basis, this particular measure really includes little of the protection that our missions deserve. Now, any purchase of additional land for this park, an original purpose of the bill, that's prohibited. And even a mere study of the possibility of additional park expansion, that's denied in this bill. Now the only way that the park can be expanded is if a private or public owner donates land to the park. In other words, it makes future expansion and protection of these San Antonio missions dependent entirely upon charity. No matter how public-minded some private property owners may be, some are likely to be unable to afford to donate the land. Does the gentlewoman have an additional minute?
I do. Let me yield an additional minute.
Thank you.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional minute.
So some private property owners will be unable to donate their land. Instead of continuing the previous bipartisan commitment to the missions, this bill reflects the same ideological extreme so evident in our larger public policy debates, like that over the future of our national transportation system. Yes, our Republican House colleagues are all for good transportation. It's just paying for that transportation that they're opposed to. And so today we hear about private property rights. Well, what about the private property right of an individual landowner to sell their property for a legitimate public purpose, such as expanding this vital national park? That is denied in today's bill. This bill will not grow the park in the way necessary to fully enhance the missions that are so very significant to San Antonio and to the culture and history of our nation. The better approach is to wait and follow Senator Hutchison's lead and to approve a freestanding bipartisan bill and give these missions the protection they deserve. I yield back.
Gentleman from Utah.
No, the surrounding land is public. Okay. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity of talking about a couple of other elements of this bill. I appreciate the gentleman from Texas and his comments. Unfortunately, yes, the study was taken out because it would be a replication of what has already been done. And the land that could be used to expand this is already in the public domain. And what we're simply saying with this particular bill is, no, we don't need to try and force private property to sell their lands. If they want to donate it, that's fine. It's not essential to the expansion of this particular park. I think it's the appropriate thing to do. Let me, though, Madam Speaker, if I could, talk about the other provision, Title 15 in there, which deals with our border security. It's one of those things that I happen to think fairly significant. If I could start with just a few charts so that people understand what is going on. This chart is simply the division of this country by Border Patrol sections. You'll find out that certain sections have a lot more people coming into this country illegally than other sections. For 09 and 10, those are the last 2 years for which we have full data, there are about 500,000 people that were illegally apprehended, just apprehended coming into this country. But of those 500,000, 250,000, 51% or more, were coming through one sector, which happens to be the Tucson, Arizona sector. That's not even the entire state of Arizona. So the question has to ask, why are 200,000+ people being apprehended in Arizona when in Maine you've got, looks like about 39 people that were apprehended? Why is this the area of entrance of choice? I think it's undeniably that one of the reasons is simply because the territory on that southern border. Everything in red on this border is land that is owned by the federal government. You will see that 80% of Arizona is federal land, much of that being wilderness and endangered species habitat or conservation rights of way. One of the ironies is our Border Patrol, which is tasked with securing our border, has almost unlimited rights to do what they need to do to protect our border on private property, and no one objects to it. which is why the statement of the gentlelady from New York is somewhat disingenuous, because most of her district is indeed private property. Border Patrol already has these kinds of options. It is only on federal property that the Federal Border Patrol is prohibited from doing its federal job. And that seems bizarre and indeed unusual. See, this is what the border actually looks like when the world is turned upside down. That's the fence, and that's the one road that the Border Patrol is allowed to use if this happens to be federal wilderness designation. The break in the fence, by the way, happens to be there so that animals can go freely from Mexico and the United States and back and forth. I think I could contend that not only animals are using that kind of break in the fence. But needless to say, the issue at hand is simply, why is the Border Patrol prohibited from going into certain federal areas when they need to do it, even though the bad guys, the drug cartels, the human traffickers, the kidnapping rings, the prostitution rings are allowed to go in there? We have on these federal wilderness areas 8,000 miles of illegal roads created by illegal drug traffickers going into this area, and the Border Patrol, by our rules and regulations and laws, is prohibited from going into that same area. Is it right that they, in hot pursuit, would have to go to the edge of one of those wilderness areas and then have to wait? And indeed, that is what has happened. Secretary Napolitano, when she was first put in there, simply said that one of the issues is, in the southwest border, it can be detrimental to effective accomplishment of our mission. In fact, it may be inadvisable for officer safety to wait for the arrival of horses for pursuit purposes or attempt to apprehend smuggling vehicles within wilderness with less than capable forms of transportation. Border Patrol clearly recognizes this. They actually tell us they don't need more money, they don't need more manpower. What they need is access into that area, which currently they are denied. Let me show you how that works. This is simply one of the sensors that's used. So instead of having an actual fence, you use the sensor. It's a truck with a sensor on the back of it. In this federal national monument, which is almost all wilderness designation, the Border Patrol wanted to move this truck from point A to point B. It took the land manager 3 months to grant approval to back up the truck and move it to some other place. During that 3 months, there was a 7-mile blackout area in which there was no surveillance possible. At the end of that 7 months, if the land manager had said, "Nah, that area is too sensitive, I don't think you should go there," I would have objected, but I would have understood. Unfortunately, after 3 months of review, he let them move the truck, which was too late to do it then. That kind of example of what is happening on our border is replicated time and time again. Let me give you some examples. 2007, the Border Patrol asked permission to improve 2 forest roads in the Coronado National Forest, total 4 or 5 miles on the border at the edge of this area. They wanted to be able to move their mobile surveillance systems to a higher ground to actually get control of the particular area. They would use the road at most once a day. But the Fish and Wildlife Service delayed the decision because they were afraid some of the dirt may eventually get into one of the streams in the particular area. The net result is in 2011, permission still not being granted in this particular area. A catastrophic wildfire burned 68,000 acres. 3 illegal aliens were arrested and 1 admitted for actually starting the blaze. In 2010, the Border Patrol requested 3 helicopter landing sites in the Miller Peak Wilderness. The Forest Service liked the idea because they could use those sites also for fire suppression. But once again, the Fish and Wildlife Service, a competing agency, had concerns because it would have an impact on the Mexican spotted owl. Unfortunately, when they did a survey, they found that there were no spotted owls in the area. Nonetheless, the Fish and Wildlife Service stopped the construction of those helicopter pads, and in 2011, you guessed it, 1 year later, a 32,000-acre fire that destroyed dozens of homes took place, and once again it was found that illegals coming into this country started those fires. The citizens of Tombstone, Arizona are allowed to go 5 at a time with hand tools into these wilderness areas to repair the pipeline that supplies water to the city that was damaged in these fires. Once again, the Federal Service saying the Mexican spotted owl is the reason for those limitations. GAO did a survey. They did a report. 17 of the 26 Border Patrol stations experienced delays. 14 of those 17 reported being unable to obtain permits or permission from land managers to use it. Stations that were found in California, Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico confirmed that they were unable to control the border due to land management positions. Even on the northern border, in the Spokane sector, they found once again they were being blocked from existing roads in national forest land due to environmental concerns. The GAO report found that it could take 6 months or more for permission to improve roads needed for patrolling in New Mexico. Another Border Patrol station reported 8 months in delay for permission to move a sensor. The land manager required a historic property assessment. A station in California reported that it took 9 months for permission to do road maintenance on federal land. These are the factors that are inhibiting our Border Patrol from doing their job. Now, in the GAO report, it did say, and some people look at the executive summary and are looking at it improperly, it said that 22 of the 26 agents in charge reported that the overall security status had not been affected. What that meant was their status of either being a controlled sector, a managed sector, a monitored sector had not been changed. But what they did say is they were being inhibited and impeded in doing their job to try and control our particular borders. Look, those who are coming in, the drug cartels, the human traffickers, they don't care about our laws. This is an endangered species. This cactus was cut down. But it was cut down by the drug cartel to do a roadblock across a public road in the United States so they could use it to stop cars and then mug the participants of those cars, whether those cars are Americans or there are other foreign nationals coming in there. And what is probably worst of all is the rape trees that are taking place. The violence against women that are coming down on American land in these areas. That simply means, as the coyotes lead these women across the border, at the end of that road, as the final payment, they will rape the women and then leave an article of clothing on one of the trees as a trophy for their actions. This heinous activity taking place on American land is not being prohibited now and will not be prohibited unless the Border Patrol is allowed to maintain access on this property. That's why this bill, this section, is so essential. It is the war on women. We had 19 people in the month of May this year who died in the Tucson sector alone. Unfortunately, that is an increase from what happened a year ago in May. We need to end this problem. There are 3 reasons why this section is important. Sovereign countries control their borders. We need to be able to say we control our borders. Number 2, I want to see a comprehensive immigration package go forward. But every time I hold a public town hall meeting, I know the first question that's asked me is, when will we control the border? There is a great deal of anger and anxiety out there. And it is very clear that we will never get consensus for other immigration reforms to take place until we have first reduced the anger and anxiety. C.S. Lewis said, if you do first things first, second things will be added to it. If you do second things first, you will accomplish neither first nor second things. This administration seems to be intent on trying to do, for whatever political purpose they may have, second things first. The first thing is to control the border. When we can truly look with an honest answer in the eye of our fellow citizens and say America's borders are secure, then there will be a reduction in the anger and the anxiety that will allow us to move forward. The third reason we have to do this is to stop the violence against women. These rape trees on American property, on federal land on American property, that take place because the Border Patrol does not have access to this area to patrol it effectively. It must stop. It's our duty and obligation to make that stop. With that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Utah reserves his time. The gentlelady from New York.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, a member of the Committee on Natural Resources, Mr. Costa.
Gentleman from California, recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak in opposition to the rule for H.R. 2578, the Conservation and Economic Growth Act. But first, I want to thank the gentlewoman from New York for allowing me some time to speak on what I think are some of the good things in this package, but unfortunately, some of the elements of this package that I think is not the appropriate way that we ought to be debating the challenging issues of immigration reform in the House of Representatives. First, these bills should be taken on their individual merits, not as a package.
If we consider them together, we should then have an open rule that would allow us to then debate the merits of each individual bill. Now, some of the bills contained in H.R. 2578 are helpful to my constituents, and I've supported them in the past. As an example, the measure offered by Mr. Denham allows the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to consider spillway improvements on the project by the Merced Irrigation District. This would allow us an expansion of the capacity of that reservoir. Some 1,800 feet of the Merced River would be impacted, but as a result of it, we would gain perhaps as much as 78,000 acre-feet of additional water supply, water that is much needed in the San Joaquin Valley. That is a good portion of this package. There is also other areas that I support. Language within the bill to provide certainty to the grazing community that I am an original co-sponsor for. Grazing land, public lands, provides opportunities for America's beef industry that is very essential and very important. However, this bill also contains controversial provisions that would be damaging to my constituents. H.R. 1505 gives the Customs and Borders Protection Authority to waive numerous laws pertaining to federal land management. It's just not the protection of those lands, it's farmlands, it's coastal zone management, mining, public health, safety, and public. I ask the gentlewoman for another minute or 30 seconds.
Another minute to gentleman.
Gentleman's recognized for one additional minute.
I thank the gentlewoman. H.R. 1505, as I was indicating, would waive numerous laws that pertain to very important elements of not only the coastal zone, but mining, public health, safety, and public review within 100 miles of the U.S. border. I oppose this measure because it is too sweeping in its efforts. This bill also pretends to provide border security problems on land management laws. We have challenges with our border, no question about it. I've supported additional funding for the Border Control Agency. We must protect our borders. But to do so in a land management bill makes simply no sense. We should be taking up immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform, separately from land management bills. That is, I think, the method that we ought to apply. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Utah.
Once again, Madam Speaker, I do appreciate, if I could just take 1 second before I yield to the gentleman from Iowa, yield myself 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized.
I appreciate the gentleman from California's comments, although I'm going to have to push back slightly on a few of those if it's at all possible. This particular bill deals with 100 miles from the border simply because that is the legal definition of borderland by both statute as well as judicial decree. It does not deal with coastal areas. In the committee, those areas were taken out because it's maritime area. The Border Patrol only deals with land borders in those particular areas. The 39 rules that are waivable is precedent established by this Congress. In California, where the gentleman resides, when they wanted to finish the fence, and it was being withheld by certain kinds of litigation, Homeland Security came up with 36 specific rules and regulations they wanted to be able to waive so they could do it. That was the precedent. The rules and regulations that are in this particular bill that's now Title 15 are the exact same 36. That's where the precedent comes. That's what Homeland Security wanted that time to finish their job. That's what they needed this time. However, I am also making an amendment to this bill that will reduce those 36 because, to be honest, some of those never really were a problem. It will reduce it now to the 12 that the Border Patrol thinks are the most egregious. But there is precedent for that particular thing. All we are doing is trying to give the Border Patrol the same rights on federal lands that they currently have on private property. There's no expansion of power, no expansion of jurisdiction. It's the ability to say our #1 goal is to have border security. And if there is a rule or regulation getting in the way, and there are according to GA reports, those should be waived for the purpose of border security. That's the whole purpose. We're not expanding a power. We're not taking anything more than that particular way. And with that, Madam Speaker, gentleman from Iowa would like to speak about this particular rule. I would like to yield him 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Iowa recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Utah for yielding. And
particularly appreciated given the subject matter I'm about to bring up. Madam Speaker, I have introduced legislation months ago in this Congress, in fact, as far back as last August. It's H.R. 2942. It's the result of the massive flooding that we have suffered in the Missouri River bottom last summer. The Corps of Engineers released unprecedented discharges of water coming down the Missouri River. It was 70,000 cubic feet per second was the previous high. We went through 160,000 cubic feet per second. It was the secret flood. No one could drive there. No one could boat there. You had to fly over it to see it. And it was water that was perhaps 1.5 miles wide downstream from Sioux City, Iowa, to just a few miles south of there, 8 miles wide at Blencoe, 11 miles wide upstream of Omaha, and then south of Omaha, downstream below Glenwood, it became 4 to 6 miles wide all the way down into Missouri, St. Joseph, Kansas City, and on about halfway towards St. Louis. This was a massive flood of historic proportions. It could have been prevented, yet I have not challenged the Corps of Engineers on that. I've just said to them, we need to fix the problem so it doesn't happen again. They have declared that this was a 500-year event, even though the USGS statistician said it's somewhere between a 70 and 1,000-year event. This is a piece of legislation, H.R. 2942, that enjoys the support of almost everyone that represents the Missouri River watershed area. And yes, naturally it will be more downstream, but from Sioux City downstream to the mouth, there's only one that represents the river that has not signed on to this bill. It's bipartisan. It's entirely the entire Iowa delegation and most of Nebraska, but yet the Rules Committee turned down my request to offer an amendment, even though there's no discussion and no disagreement. My amendment was germane to the bill. They raised an issue of jurisdiction after I was dismissed from the committee. I don't think that was by plan or strategy. My preparation is this, that if a member of Congress can't have their voice heard on an amendment that's germane, when all of the boxes are checked and everything was done right to present it before the committee. And by the way, I want to thank the gentleman from Florida for calling for a recorded vote on this, a party line vote, this time Democrats siding with Steve King. It's the second time the Rules Committee has turned me down this year on a legitimate request. But I'd ask, if the House is going to work its will, as the Speaker Boehner has said, we must have a Rules Committee that will allow, when it's in a proper form, allow that kind of a vote here on the floor of the House. I'm not going to get that debate. I'm not going to get that vote. And the people that I represent and all of us from Sioux City downstream to St. Louis now have been covered by not just water for an entire summer, more than 3 months of epic proportions flooding. But now what's left for us, Madam Speaker, is sand, camel habitat. I'll vote no, but I don't intend to try to bring down the rule. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentlelady from New York.
Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado and a valued member of the Committee on Rules, Mr. Polis.
Gentleman from Colorado recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for her time. I rise in opposition to the rule. I agree with my colleague from Iowa. I voted for the amendment to the rule offered by Mr. Hastings of Florida that would have allowed his amendment and others. What are we scared of here? This is what we do. We are the House of Representatives. Let us work our will. Some of us will be for amendments, some of us will be against amendments. But to hold all that power to a select group of people rather than allow the entire membership of this body to offer, again, we're talking about relevant amendments that meet the requirements, meet the rules of the House. What are we scared of in bringing that forward? Let's have a discussion on the merits. Instead, what do we have here under this rule? We have 14 separate bills all cobbled together with a limited period of time to debate all of them, and without the opportunity to amend them from both sides of the aisle that would have been afforded under either an open process or a structured process that allowed all the rules that met the requirements to be debated under this bill, each for their own period of time. Now I want to discuss in particular what I find to be one of the most egregious provisions of the bill, which is really a solution in search of a problem. Namely, this is an aspect of the bill that would waive over 40 environmental safety and public health laws and give Department of Homeland Security complete authority to seize control of federal lands within 100 miles of our northern and southern borders. Now, this provision's reach is broad. It rolls back all of the relevant protection laws. And again, for what purpose? We had a discussion on Rules Committee yesterday, and I had the opportunity, with my colleague Mr. Bishop from Utah, I had the opportunity to follow up, and it is very clear in statute that in any wilderness or any federal lands under any level of protection, if they're in hot pursuit of a suspect, they are allowed to continue that pursuit onto wilderness. Wilderness areas are not some sort of legal sanctuary where criminals can go and not be pursued. That has nothing to do with the purpose of wilderness, and it has nothing to do with the reality of wilderness. Much of my district in Colorado has wilderness areas, and if in fact they were these lawless areas that the police couldn't go to pursue suspects, all the criminals would live in the wilderness. And they would simply come out to commit crimes and then go back in. It's simply not the case. Law enforcement officials assure me that whenever they're engaged in hot pursuit, they're able to, of course, continue to pursue immigrants or other criminals, criminal aliens, etc., into wilderness territories. Now, this is a problem, the immigration issue, that cannot simply be enforced away. When we're talking about immigrants without papers, they're in our cities and towns. They're in our schools. They're the grandmother of the American grandkids. They're residents of our community. They're people I meet with them on a regular basis. We try to help our immigrants get on with their lives, contribute to our country, make it stronger. Yes, there's a problem here, and thankfully President Obama I asked for an additional minute.
I'll be glad to give you an additional minute.
Gentleman's recognized for an additional minute.
President Obama took a bold first step and reduced the number of illegal immigrants in this country by 800,000 to 1